Have you ever stopped to think about what it would be like if we talked to our friends the same way we talk to ourselves? It seems strange, but just imagine. Your friend opens up about a failure, and instead of comforting them, you say something like, "Of course, you couldn't do it, right?" Or, "Why even bother trying? That's not for you." It's almost absurd to imagine having a conversation like that with someone we love, but that's exactly how we end up talking to ourselves all the time. So, why do we do this? How did our biggest critic end up being ourselves? This internal dialogue affects so much more than we realize. It seeps into every plan we make, every dream we have, and every step we try to take. And the craziest part? Most of the time, we don't even notice the weight of it. This cycle of self-criticism and excessive self-demand starts long before we're even aware of it. It takes shape in the earliest interactions we have with authority figures or people who are important to us. In childhood, our perception of who we are is deeply connected to what we hear from others, especially parents, teachers, family members, and peers. Maybe it was a teacher's critique, a comment from your parents about how you need to do better, or even teasing from classmates during a vulnerable moment. Comments like these, when repeated or delivered at critical moments, get recorded in our minds, shaping how we see ourselves. From these experiences, we begin to develop a critical mindset toward ourselves. Over time, this negative filter becomes a kind of lens through which we view our own abilities and worth. The study Confirmation Bias, a ubiquitous phenomenon in many guises, by Raymond S. Nickerson, illustrates how confirmation bias works. When we internalize these critical ideas, our minds unconsciously start searching for evidence to confirm them. So, throughout life, anything that supports the idea that we're not good enough is absorbed more easily, reinforcing this negative self-image. This negative filter paves the way for a pattern of thinking called all or nothing. Once we're used to seeing ourselves critically, it becomes easy to fall into the trap of believing that either we do everything perfectly or we're not capable at all. This kind of thinking turns any mistake or difficulty into a complete failure, leaving no room for middle ground or learning. The mind gets stuck in this cycle, where even small missteps feel like proof that we can't succeed or aren't good enough. It's a tough pattern to break, but understanding how these layers are formed is the first step toward rebuilding the way we see ourselves. This allows us to start questioning these ideas and, over time, create a more realistic and compassionate view of ourselves. A study by psychologist Elizabeth Scott, PhD, titled The Toxic Effects of Negative Self-Talk, shows how this critical voice we've built over the years affects not only our self-esteem, but also our mental health. People trapped in a cycle of constant self-criticism are at a higher risk of developing depression, anxiety, elevated stress, and other emotional issues. This happens because excessive self-criticism ends up affecting our motivation and undermining our confidence, as if we're always dealing with an inner enemy. Additionally, another study published in Scientific Reports investigated how the type of internal dialogue, positive or negative, changes the way our brains function in cognitive tasks. Researchers found that while self-criticism often decreases our ability to handle challenges, self-compassion and self-support strengthen resilience and improve performance. This means our brain actively responds to the way we talk to ourselves, either reinforcing insecurity or boosting confidence. This cycle of self-criticism that we carry is actually a defense mechanism our mind created. The idea, deep down, is to protect us from possible disappointments, preventing us from taking too many risks and getting hurt in the process. But in practice, this mechanism ends up limiting us far more than it helps, building an invisible barrier that sabotages our dreams and weakens our confidence. To understand how this unfolds, imagine this. You're developing a new idea at work. At first, you're genuinely excited. You see the potential in the idea and feel like it could work. But then automatic thoughts start creeping in. Like, what if it's not good enough? Or, if I mess up, everyone will realize I'm not as competent as they think. These thoughts are so subtle that we don't notice how much they drain our energy and motivation. When we pay attention to them, we start hesitating, procrastinating, and even abandoning the attempt altogether. This is the real trap, but by understanding how this process is built, we can start dismantling it, questioning these automatic thoughts, and making room for a more balanced and generous perspective of who we are. This helps us build a new narrative where mistakes don't define our ability, but instead become opportunities to learn and expand our skills, rather than proving something to anyone. Often, the weight of guilt and shame creates a big barrier that we fall into a cycle of self-punishment. It's as if, unconsciously, we think we deserve this suffering, reinforcing how much we criticize and limit ourselves. In these moments, it's common to think, how could I forgive myself after all this? Or, I don't deserve compassion after so many mistakes. This kind of thought reflects just how deeply this situation can go, leading to a lack of self-love and a growing distance from who we really are. That's why the first step toward real change is to strengthen self-love. Self-love is the recognition that, despite mistakes, failures, and challenges, we are worthy of respect and compassion. It's a conscious choice to treat yourself with the same care and understanding you'd give to someone important to you. A practical exercise for this is to pay attention to what you say to yourself in moments of self-criticism. When thoughts like, I never do anything right, or, of course, this was going to go wrong, come up, imagine you're talking to someone you love and want to support. Would you say the same things? This small distance helps us see how often we're harder on ourselves than on anyone else. Next time this kind of thought comes up, try replacing it with something more compassionate, like, it's okay. Everyone makes mistakes, or I can learn from this and do better next time. When self-love starts to take root, self-forgiveness naturally follows as an act of liberation. Forgiving yourself doesn't mean denying mistakes or difficulties, but recognizing that we're all in a process of learning. It's allowing yourself to move forward without carrying the weight of guilt, knowing you deserve to continue with lightness and dignity. Finally, seeking professional support like therapy can be an extremely valuable step. A therapist can offer the tools and guidance necessary to develop self-compassion, resilience, and personal growth, tailoring practices to each person's unique needs. And by the way, I call my inner critic Crickery. Has anyone else named theirs? Remember, you are not the impressions of your past or the criticisms you once heard. You are who you choose to be today.